Hi everyone, hope you're all okay. This CPD is for the fortnight beginning the 1st of February, so it will take us up until the half term. And the focus is cognition and memory, so building on a lot of the ideas that we've been looking at. But I've tried, as I have done recently, to put it into the sort of remote context that we're dealing with right now. So hopefully there'll be some useful takeaways and ideas for the challenges that you're facing right now. So I'm trying, as I always do, to model something that I'm suggesting we could do in our remote lessons, in our live lessons with students. So I'm imagining that we're in a Teams live lesson now, or a live session, and I'm saying to you, I'm giving you a pre-warning that you've got 2 minutes think time, and you might want to jot some ideas down, because in 2 minutes time I'm going to be asking you to put into the chat box either agree or disagree in response to this statement. But I will then be calling upon people to justify their answer, hence why you might want to jot some things down. So remote teaching is more demanding than classroom teaching. So you've got 2 minutes to think about it, jot down any ideas and be ready to respond. So at this point, of course, we would literally give students that 2 minute think time, and you may well need to have a timer, whether it be just on your phone or on your desk in front of you, or whether you're using a timer function in PowerPoint. But if you've told the students you're going to give them 2 minutes think time, which is really important, then you must honour that rather than rush on, which I know is often the temptation. Now you might think, what is Helen doing? We always start with retrieval. Has she thrown everything out, all of the previous ideas? Definitely not. But I wanted to model something because I think this is quite important, and it's a slightly different lens for us to think about. There's a couple of things I did there using the icons. Now, of course, they would only work if you've previously explained them to students what those icons mean. But I'm going to share something with you a bit later on that kind of shows how you might do that. We're making it really clear what the expectation is of the student during that 2 minutes. We're prompting them that they might want to write things down because they are going to be called upon, possibly, during the question and answer. But what we're also doing is we're starting with a question that draws them in. And in this case, I've chosen a statement that draws you in because it's something you will have lots of feelings about right now. You know, how challenging remote teaching is, or what you miss about classroom teaching. It's grabbed you. Now, I know that for the last couple of years, we've always said lessons begin with retrieval, because we know that not only provides that settled, focused start to the lesson, but it ensures that we are getting the students to retrieve, and we know that's really important to allow them to encode that knowledge in their long-term memory. And of course, I want the students to have that normacy, that idea that yes, it's as we normally do, we start with retrieval. And so I'm not suggesting that we move away from that. But there is quite a lot of power in having this kind of hook question. So your question, or your statement in this case, could be linked to your retrieval. Or you might just use this technique a little bit later in your sequence, in your live lesson. Or if it's a pre-recorded lesson, you can still allow that think time, prompt them to write ideas down. But the idea of this is, and it's from the Teaching in the Online Classroom book by Doug Lemov that I've kind of referenced in the Happy Mondays a couple of times now. He said that when they first started doing online training for teachers about exactly this, what they found was that teachers were often reluctant to type things into the chat, to contribute, to unmute themselves in these sessions. Well, if teachers and adults feel that way and are that reluctant, then our students are likely to be as well. But when they shifted things around a little bit and they began their session by making it really obvious, you are going to have to interact here. You are going to have to type things into the chat. I am going to be calling upon you for discussion and questions. When that was made really clear from the outset, and they were challenged to do it within the first 2 minutes, they found that for the rest of the session, the engagement and the interactivity was much higher. People were asking questions, typing things in, raising the hand. And actually, I thought that was quite a powerful sort of experience to draw upon, because that could work for our students too. Having that something to hook them in, obviously linked to the learning, but make clear you are going to have to speak this lesson, or you are going to have to type in, you are going to have to be involved in breakout rooms, because that's how we're going to be doing our learning today. But we would still want to hold on to our course, we still want to hold on to our retrieval. So in the usual style, here's your retrieval. Now, I've actually called this revisited because I've asked you those exact same questions before in a previous CPD, but we did it as a paired interrogation task. But we know that sometimes the best retrieval revisits things from previously, keeps bringing those same questions back until they're absolutely secure in the student's long-term memory. So I'm kind of employing that same strategy here. So you would pause the video and you would note some things down. Now, again, I'm trying to model here that we're allowing students an opportunity to move away from the screen. That if it's a pre-recorded video or if it's a live lesson, you pause, you stop talking, you turn your camera off and your mic off, and so that there aren't those distractions, and you ask the students to write on a piece of paper or in their exercise book. You're allowing them to move their eyes away from the screen. You're allowing them to write and to express their ideas in the way that they are so used to doing. And it, of course, is still a really important skill for them to be continuing with. So you would pause me and you would actually jot down your ideas and your responses to each of those questions. So we'll quickly review, and we would green pen, and we would indicate to the students that we would green pen. It was, of course, Ebbinghaus who developed that idea of the forgetting curve, and that we can slow that process through retrieval. So our retrieval is really, really important to cling on to, even in remote learning. And I know a lot of people are beginning with a live input. They're leading the students through the retrieval, doing a little bit of Q&A, and then setting the students off to go away and complete the task, whilst just staying in the live call. And I think that's a really sensible balance between the two things. And of course, when you set them away to go and do the task, it doesn't need to be typed, it doesn't need to be screen based. So we're thinking about that kind of screen fatigue that students will be suffering in the same way that I know staff are. Encoding, of course, is that storing of knowledge in the long-term memory, and that's our goal, that's what we're trying to do. And we also, of course, as we've talked before, trying to get them to make connections and to develop their schema. The difference between cognition and metacognition, well, cognition is simply our thinking, our mental processes, whereas when we are able to monitor those, when we're aware of them and we're very much in control of them, that's when we're being more metacognitive. It was, of course, Pavio, that's always a common mistake, who developed the theory of dual coding and the principle of dual coding, and it was Oliver Cavalioli who has more recently kind of put it into the context of teaching and in education. And cognitive load theory was developed by Sweller, and is that idea that our working memory, the bit that we're using mostly in the classroom, is limited. Okay, so the focus of today is, as I said, cognition and memory, and what we can do and what we need to think about in terms of remote learning. And so I come back to this. I've shown you this before, and it is from that paper by Shimamura, which uses the Marge model. And when Tom Sherrington came and did some training with us, not this academic year, but last, he talked quite a bit about this idea as well. And it's the A that I really want us to focus on today. This idea that when we're thinking about learning, we have to make sure that, yes, we motivate, and hopefully that hooking in with that question or statement will help. Yes, we need to help them to relate and make the connections and generate their own learning. But unless we can ensure that we're grabbing their attention, then the rest of that is pointless. And this isn't about making it fun and whizzy, we know that, but actually we're up against it at the moment in terms of ensuring students' attention. And we are up against it to some degree in terms of grabbing that attention, because our students are very used to being media multitaskers and flipping between lots of different things. And this that you can see there is from David Didow's session that he did last year, one of the Research Ed Home sessions, where he was really focusing on this idea of attention. But one particular thing I want to take from this is just how when we do task switch, we misremember things. We're making life so much harder for ourselves to be able to construct those schema and to be able to encode information. We often find that when you are task switching, you're flicking between one thing or another, you will of course be easily distracted, and you'll be much slower in processing. Now, I found this, speaking personally, at the moment, obviously, everything is screen-based, and I was marking my Year 13 assessments on OneNote, which was great, and being able to type the feedback directly in and highlight things. But of course, as you're sat using the computer, the emails are pinging up, and then you're noticing something pings up on Teams to say that somebody submitted an assignment or whatever. And so, I better just check that email. I better just see that. And actually, I was so much slower to be able to complete the marking of the assessments because I was distracted and I was switching and swapping between tasks. Now, if you think about it, we are not in control of our students' environment. So when we think about this diagram that I've shown you many, many times, and actually it's really quite a busy diagram, isn't it? Lots of information on, and we have to be really careful actually about not overloading and thinking about our slide design. But what we can do is we can draw attention to the particular bit, and something as simple as that, an animation fly-in that just circles or draws attention to the part of the diagram that you really want students to focus on, will help. But it's this bit, it's this environment that right now we haven't got the control over, and we need them to pay attention to our explanation or our diagram, our Teams call, and there's so much competing. And I wanted you to think about what's wrong with that picture. Let's imagine that main screen there is the Teams call. What's wrong with that picture? Yeah, that student at home seemingly engaging with your live lesson is in your Teams call. They may also have open YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else young people use. I don't know. That's all competing for their attention. And if you try and put yourself in the mind of a teenager, I would imagine some of those are more compelling. Not trying to criticize anybody's lessons, but I'm just trying to be honest. This is what we are trying to compete against. So I'm not suggesting we have to make our lessons whizzy in order to be able to stand up against TikTok. But we need to help support our students to ensure they understand where their attention and where their focus is required throughout your lesson. And there's a few things that we can do. And by using these little techniques I'm trying to model here, having the circles, having the kind of zooming in on particular things on our PowerPoint will help. It will help students, and it'll help reduce that kind of cognitive overload too. So there's a couple of things we can do to really help our students and to help them structure their time and their tasks, as well as focus their attention. And this overlaps with the Happy Monday. So hopefully we're going to start to see people doing more of this. And it's very simple. It's just a case of adding a new slide at the beginning of your PowerPoint or whatever it is you're using. So this is just an example of one that I'm going to be sharing with my Year 8s on Wednesday. And it's just making very clear to them what they can expect in the next 50 minutes, what to expect in this lesson, but more helpfully, I would say, for the student, that almost tick list of what they are expected in terms of submitting. Because as a student, that's some of the feedback that's coming back from Fran's student survey. They would find it really helpful if at the beginning of the lesson, because that's when you would display this, they've got their title, they've got their date, it was just made very clear to students And I guess in both what we put on the screen and also what we say, we have to kind of have that economy of language. We have to remember that we're trying to keep things very clear and very succinct, warm, and, you know, like we would be in the classroom, but be economical if we can. And it's also not a bad idea to talk to students and to remind students of that idea of not allowing themselves to be distracted. So don't have all of those other tabs open. And if they're, obviously some students may be accessing your lesson on their phone, so that's different. But if they're not have the phone in front of them so they're seeing the messages and the notifications ping up. Have it silent, have it out the way. And we hope that parents support these strategies and are talking to their children about the best way, the best sort of learning environment. But with the best will in the world, it won't be happening everywhere. But we can prompt them, we can remind them. So that might just be a slide that you could add in. And similarly, I think sometimes when you see students several times a week and you might be using a mixture of live lessons and pre-recorded and so on, it's useful to give them a plan. So this is an example of, this was from last week actually, what I gave my year 12s. So telling them this is what your week will look like. This is when you're expected to be in a live lesson. This is where you'll be completing some work on OneNote. This is where it's pre-recorded. You know, you do what works for you, but I think it is helping our students to know what's coming and what the expectation is. And of course, then there's less excuses too. So I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to ask you to take a pause point and summarise in no more than 3 bullet points what you've taken from the session so far. And so obviously when you've unpaused, you can see what I'm doing here. I'm trying to say you can have a simple icon to indicate to the students it's time to pause the video, or in a live lesson, I'm going to shut up, turn my camera off, I'm not distracting you, you're doing this. We're creating those opportunities to generate learning. All of those same things that we've been talking about, the importance of generative learning, allowing the students to piece things together, to check they can do it, to check they really understand it. We need to build these in. Now, in Doug Lemov's book, he actually suggests that good practice is that no more than 5 minutes go past before another pause point. And actually, that probably is right for students, thinking about the amount we can take in, thinking about the need to step away, process, generate. About 5 minutes and then a pause point is probably a sensible suggestion. And then there's other times where we should turn our cameras off. We obviously have our students without their cameras, but actually some parts of our lesson, such as reading, need no distraction. Now, I don't think we should be stopping reading, definitely not. In fact, this is the perfect time to be doing readings with students, whether that's asking them to read aloud or whether that's you reading to them, reading annotations. All of those same strategies that go on in the classroom should still be going on remotely. But actually, in the classroom, we would do whatever we could to focus the students' attention, wouldn't we, on the piece that they were reading? And we should do the same remotely. So I'm going to practice what I preach, and I'm just going to read you a short passage from the Doug Lemov book, which I thought was quite an interesting way of looking at this. The scarcity of time and attention online also has the potential to be a silver lining, because it forces us to pay attention to the demands of working memory. It makes us more aware of attention, utilising pause points to consolidate memory, incorporating frequent retrieval practice, being aware of cognitive load, and using strong systems and routines to support all of those components. Remote learning puts these concerns front and centre, but they're potentially high leverage changes we can make to our in-person classrooms as well. So actually, a lot of what we are fine-tuning and developing and having to think about, because it is a different situation, and we're having to be really mindful of the clarity of our explanation and our instructions and how we're presenting material to our students, it's going to pay dividends when we're back in the classroom as well. This is all good development of quality instruction. You'll have seen on that previous slide then, I'd had the little icon of the reading. Now that would be in the classroom to let students know that's what we're focusing on right now. But it's also for me. Now these are the icons I use with my classes, and it looks a bit much there. That's a bit too much, all the different colour. They would never all feature on the same slide. Normally it would just be one little icon on a slide to indicate we're reading now, we're watching, we're about to do some writing, and that's what you would be submitting. So it's just those little visuals that help students to know what the expectations are. You'd obviously have to introduce students to those initially before you could use them. But that little reading icon was a prompt to me too, as the teacher, as the person leading the session. And that's really important. One thing that in the book, in Doug Lemov's book, he says is that we have to think about teachers' working memory. And I don't think we often talk about that or think about that. And actually, most of the time as the teacher, your working memory isn't put under too much strain because so much of what you do is almost automatic and natural. But for many of us, myself included, this new way of working is not automatic or natural. And your mind is thinking about, oh, something's just popped up in the chat. And then I've got to share my screen. Oh, do I need to unshare my screen in order to then do that? Or but what happens? Your mind is thinking about lots and lots of different things. And of course, that's going to get easier as we get more used to it. But we can do certain things to make it easier for ourselves. So if you know you're going to use the chat Q&A at a particular point in your lesson, have that a little icon, something that works for you as a little prompt. It's a prompt to the students, it's a prompt to you. All right, yes, then that was what I was going to do at that point. It's almost like you're planning. Now, I know you'll have thought it all through, but in the actual process of doing your live lesson, it is easy for that kind of cognitive overload. So we do have to think about the teacher in all of this as well, and little strategies that can make that slightly easier for us too. Because at the end of the day, the smoother that is, the better experience the students are getting. So just to finish, really, I wanted to just bring some of that together, and in the same way we might provide that recap to students. So this is what we've done today and this is what you're expected to do. These are just ideas, some of the things I've pulled out from the session and from reading the book. So in the same way in the classroom you would ask students to repeat back, can you just tell me what we're all about to do? Just repeat back the expectation. We should still be doing that remotely. We should think carefully about the economy of our language, giving the clear instruction, allowing the time for process, and not feeling the temptation to fill every space with our words. Linked to that, the clarity of instruction, both visually and verbally. Use of animation, not to distract, but to draw attention, the odd circle that flies in onto the number of paragraphs or the definition that we're thinking about. Use of pause points regularly throughout, whether pre-recorded or live, about every 5 minutes, and the use of those visuals or icons to prompt to yourself to reduce your cognitive load and to prompt to the students. And I know I've mentioned before about the use of timers, and whether that's you add it onto your Teams group or whether it's that you use one built into a PowerPoint. I think it's really important that we do continue to do that and actually think about how long do they really need. And I know many of you use the exercise book to model, and you will actually complete the task yourself, which is brilliant. And I know people are putting that to really good use with the visualizers and all the rest of it. Well, if you are doing that, time how long it takes you and add some, because it will take the students longer. But I think if you're actually going to do it yourself, it helps give you that understanding of how long they need. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for your attention again. And do let me know if you've tried anything, if you've got any particular strategies that you're finding are working, and I'll try and build a way to share it with everybody. Okay, have a good week. Take care.